Even in her worst dreams Martina could not imagine where her new adventures would lead. Martina and Lukasz had been married for 10 years, they had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and their house was quite decent. Lukasz was an entrepreneur, he had his own small company, which required a lot of time and effort, but he always tried to find moments to pay attention to his family. Even if he returned late, when the children were already asleep, he always tried to spend at least a few minutes with Martina, to talk about the day, to find out how the children were doing. Martina didn't work, she was busy with the house and the children. From the outside, one would have thought she was lucky, her husband was earning money and her house was full. She always looked well-groomed, kept in order, and Lukasz was proud of it. But something had changed in the last few months. Martina had become distant. They used to be able to sit together in the evening, talk, laugh, but now she was more and more often just nodding and staring at her phone. Lukasz came home from work late one night, as usual. The house was quiet, the kids were already asleep, and there was a cool dinner on the kitchen table. It was strange, a whole day at home and dinner was cold? Lukasz heated up the food in the microwave and walked into the living room, where Martina was sitting with her phone in her hands, not paying attention to him. "How are you?" Lukasz asked cautiously, sitting down next to her. "Tired," she answered, not even raising her eyes from the phone. Lukasz remained silent, though something inside him twitched. He had long noticed that his wife had become different, but he didn't want to believe it. Memories of how they used to discuss plans for the weekend, laughing at the jokes of the children. Now everyone was living on their own. A few more days passed, and Lukasz began to notice that Martina was leaving more and more often in the evenings. Before, she hardly ever left the house, only sometimes going out with her friends. Now she was saying that she needed to get some air, to meet her friends. Lukasz didn't say anything, but inside he began to feel uneasy. He felt that she was living some kind of life of her own, where there was no room for him. One evening, when Martina was about to leave again, Lukasz couldn't stand it. "Martin, you've been going out too often lately. What's going on?" She paused for a moment, buttoning her coat, then looked at him with slight irritation. "Lukasz, what did you want? You're working, and I'm with the kids all day. I need to relax a little too, to get some air. To meet my friends, to chat." Lukasz nodded, but inside he didn't like it. Her tone felt detached, even cold. As if she was reporting back to him rather than explaining. He wanted to say something else, but only sighed heavily as the door closed behind Martine. Sitting on the couch, Lukasz looked at the TV, but his thoughts were far away. It was hard for him to understand what was going on with his wife. Every day he was tormented more and more by doubts. Her evening outings became more frequent. It used to be once a week, now it was 2, 3 times. Each time she said she was going to a friend's house, but when Lukasz asked who she was with, she answered one-wordedly, Svetka or someone else. But it all seemed somehow suspicious. One evening Martina said that she might stay the night at a friend's house. Lukasz nodded, but he couldn't get rid of the disturbing thoughts. She had never stayed overnight before. He sat in the kitchen with a cup of strong tea and pondered her words. The children seemed all right, but why had she become so distant? Martina was no longer interested in the children's affairs, no longer checked their homework, no longer participated in the organization of the weekends. All of this now fell to Lukasz. He woke up in the morning, got the children ready for school, helped them with their lessons, put them to bed, told them bedtime stories, while Martina was somewhere else in the world, as if she had forgotten that they had a family. One evening, when she was about to leave again, Lukasz stopped her at the door. "You've completely stopped spending time with the children. What's going on?" Martina turned to him with irritation. "What do you want from me? I'm at home all day, and in the evening I just want to relax, socialize with my friends. Is that forbidden?" Lukasz sighed, not wanting to quarrel, but felt that the situation was out of his control. Things were different, and he knew it. But how to fix it? That night, when the door closed behind Martina, Lukasz first had the thought, what if it's not about girlfriends? Each week the suspicions grew stronger. He tried to chase them away. No, she can't cheat, we've been together for 10 years. But it was getting harder and harder to ignore the thoughts. One day, while looking through Martina's phone left on the kitchen table, Lucas noticed that she often received messages from an unknown number. It was strange. She had never hidden her phone before, but now she put it on silent mode as soon as it came near her. Lucas felt that something was wrong. His suspicions were growing like a snowball, but he didn't want to jump to conclusions. A few more days passed, and one evening, when Martina was about to leave for her friend's house, Lucas decided not to keep silent any longer. He walked her to the door, wished her a good evening and, as soon as the door closed behind her, quickly put on his jacket, took the car keys and followed her out. Martina walked confidently, as if she knew exactly where she was going. Lucas kept a decent distance, trying not to attract attention. His heart was beating like crazy. Maybe I'm doing this for nothing? He thought. Maybe I'm just an idiot and she's really going out with her friends? But curiosity and anxiety took over. About 10 minutes later, Lukasz saw Martina get into a car. And not just any car, but the car of David, his business partner. Lukasz recognized him immediately. They had worked together for years, sharing the profits and problems of the firm. David was a man Lukasz trusted almost like a brother. And now this same David was sitting in the car with his wife. The sight was like a stab in the heart. Lucas froze, not knowing what to do. Then he quickly pulled out his phone and took a few pictures of David opening the car door and Martina getting into the passenger seat. The car started and Lukasz, without losing sight of them, got into his car and followed. They stopped at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. It was nothing remarkable, just an ordinary place where almost no one was there in the evening. Lukasz parked farther away so he wouldn't be noticed and kept watching. David and Martina got out of the car, laughing, walking side by side as if the world around them had ceased to exist. Lukasz's fists clenched at that moment. He wanted to burst in there and make a scandal for the whole restaurant, but something stopped him. He had already seen what he was most afraid of, but he didn't know what to do about it yet. Lukasz took a few more pictures, recording their every move. They spent several hours in the cafe, Lukasz sitting in the car the whole time, watching them like a slow-motion movie. When they finally got out, his heart squeezed again. Why? Why them? He took a couple more pictures as they got back into the car and followed them all the way out. All the way home, the scenes from the cafe, Martina laughing with David, her face as she got into his car as if it were just a normal game, were in front of Lukasz's eyes. Everything clenched in Lukasz's chest, as if someone was hitting him in the ribs with an iron stick. But he decided not to make a scene. It won't change anything, he thought. He was a man of action, not hysterics. If something was wrong, he fixed it quietly and cold-bloodedly. And now he had made up his mind, I'll take my revenge quietly, so that they won't realize how everything will fall apart. Lucas knew the business inside out. Everything was based on his experience and connections. David dealt more with clients, meetings, and organization. Lukasz, on the other hand, controlled the finances and strategy. And although the firm was shared, no one knew as much about it as he did. A plan for revenge had matured in his head quickly. Lucas decided, my revenge will be subtle but devastating. The first thing Lukasz did was to start withdrawing money from the joint accounts. Not all at once and not in large sums, but little by little, carefully, so that David would not suspect anything. Every day Lucas transferred small sums to accounts registered to shell companies, which he had prepared in advance to take over if things went wrong. He knew that sooner or later David would notice these disappearances, but by then it would be too late. In the office, Lucas continued his usual demeanor, affable, reserved, friendly. David would come into the office, talk about plans, share news about clients, and Lucas would smile, nod, keep the conversation going. But inside him, everything had changed. David was no longer his friend, but a traitor to whom he was about to teach a lesson. Every day, Lukasz methodically continued his plan. He began to meet with key partners of the company, offering them favorable terms to move to the new firm, which he was creating secretly from David. At the same time, Lukasz began to gather information about David's financial situation, his loans, liabilities, future plans. It turned out that David was much less careful with money than Lukasz had previously thought. He had serious debts that he never talked about. And that played into Lukasz's hands. Let his life go downhill, he thought grimly. Weeks passed, and Lukasz had already transferred enough money to start the second phase of his plan. David didn't suspect anything yet. He continued working as usual, confident that the firm was thriving. Meanwhile, Lukasz was preparing to strike. He knew that revenge had to be not only financial, but also moral. Everything had to collapse so that David would be left with nothing. Several months passed. On the surface, everything seemed to be running smoothly, but Lukasz was working in the shadows, ruining their business. The first bell rang was the rejection of one of the big clients they had been negotiating with for almost a year. It was unexpected even for David. He tried to re-establish contact with the client, calling, writing, but in response, complete silence. Lukasz sat in his office, watching his floundering and not giving any sign that anything was wrong. David was getting more and more nervous. He came to Lukasz for advice, but he only shrugged his shoulders and said, "Well, things happen, maybe the terms of the contract did not suit him." David nodded, but looked more and more confused. A few weeks later, things got even worse. One by one, the big investors started withdrawing their money. David fumbled around, trying to mend relationships, but every door was slammed in his face. One day David burst into Lukasz's office, his face pale, dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights. "Lukasz, we're in serious trouble. Clients are dropping out, banks are refusing credit, something is going wrong. Have you noticed anything?" he asked with concern in his voice. Lukasz looked at him coldly. There was no longer the warmth and support in his eyes that had been there before. "Things happen," Lukasz answered calmly. "Maybe we should review the contracts, see where things could have gone wrong." David nodded, but he still looked completely lost. He spent more time traveling, trying to rebuild relationships with clients and banks, but nothing worked. Lukasz methodically went on with the plan, destroying everything they had built over the years. A few more weeks passed and the real problems began. One by one, investors withdrew their money, clients refused to make deals, and loans were not granted. David, not realizing what was happening, kept rushing around the office, but it was all in vain. Lukasz watched from the sidelines, not letting on that he knew what was going on. "Lukasz," David said one day, coming into the office, "we need to do something urgently, or we'll lose everything. Can you pull in your connections? Talk to our old clients, they have always respected you." Lukasz sat at the table, listening to David, but inside he no longer had the friendship that had bound them together before. David was no longer his friend, he was the man who had betrayed him, and now he was paying for it. "I have my own business," Lukasz answered dryly. "This is not the time to deal with other people's problems." David froze, not expecting such an answer. He had always been able to rely on Lukasz, but now he suddenly realized that something had changed. "Are you serious?" David was shocked. "We're partners, if I collapse, you'll lose everything too." Lukasz looked at him coldly. "I think you'll be fine," he replied and returned to his papers, signaling that the conversation was over. David walked slowly out of the office, still not realizing what had happened. He hoped that Lukasz would support him, but he didn't know that he had been preparing for this moment for a long time. A few more weeks passed, and David's business went downhill. His business was falling apart before his eyes. One by one, major clients refused to cooperate, investors withdrew their money, and banks began to demand repayment of loans. David was in despair, not understanding how he had turned from a successful entrepreneur into a bankrupt. He was flitting between meetings and calls, trying to salvage something, but it was all to no avail. Lukasz watched from the sidelines, cold and impassive. For him, it was a well-deserved payback. David himself had destroyed everything they had built over the years, and Lukasz wasn't going to help him. He had been preparing for this moment for a long time, and now that his plan was almost complete, it was time to dot all the I's. That evening, when the children were asleep, Lukasz stayed in the kitchen, waiting for Martina to return. She returned late as usual, quietly took off her jacket and headed for the bedroom. But Lukasz stopped her. "Martin, we need to talk," his voice was firm but calm. She froze at the door, looking at him in surprise. Her face expressed irritation and unwillingness to talk. "Lukasz, I'm tired, let's do it tomorrow," she tried to evade, but Lukasz did not let her go. "No, let's do it now," he gestured for her to sit across from him. Martina slowly came and sat down, her eyes expressed irritation, but inside she felt that something was wrong. Lukasz put his phone on the table and showed her the pictures from a few weeks ago. On the screen were shots of Martina and David, in the cafe, next to the car. Martina turned pale as she looked at the pictures. "What is this?" she asked quietly, even though she knew exactly what was happening. "It's you and David. I know everything. How long has this been going on? A month? 2? 6 months?" Martine was silent, her gaze roving around the room. When she realized she couldn't get out of it, she sighed. "It doesn't matter how long. Lukasz, He interrupted her, his voice firm. "I don't need an excuse. I didn't show you this so you could start explaining it to me. I only want to know one thing, are you going to go to him?" Martina didn't expect such a question. There was chaos inside her. She knew that David was only a temporary infatuation, and their marriage with Lukasz had seemed solid. But now everything was crumbling right before her eyes. "Lukasz," she began in a shaky voice, "it was a mistake. I don't know how it happened. I didn't intend to leave you or the children." "David is bankrupt," Lukasz interrupted her coldly. "Did you know that his business is falling apart? He has no money, no prospects. So what are you going to do? Are you going to be with him?" Martina looked at Lukasz with horror. She knew that David had problems at work, but she hadn't realized it was this bad. "I didn't know," she mumbled, trying to collect her thoughts. "Lukasz, I never wanted to destroy our family. David, it was stupid, wrong." Lukasz looked at her with icy calmness. "You ruined it all on your own. I trusted you, and you chose him. But now he's at the bottom, and I want to know, are you with him or staying here? Don't think I'll forget everything." Martine was silent. She knew it was the end. She couldn't hide anymore and she couldn't go back as if nothing had happened. Lukasz had left her no choice. She stared at the pictures as if her life had shattered into pieces right in front of her. She'd always thought she could somehow get away with it, that Lukasz wouldn't notice, or would just accept it if he found out. But now that everything was out in the open, she realized she'd been wrong. She'd already lost. "Lukasz, please," her voice was shaking. "It was a mistake, I don't know how it happened. David means nothing to me, I'm a fool, do you understand? Give me another chance, I'll make it right." Martina licked her lips nervously, pleading with her eyes, but Lukasz looked at her like a stranger. Everything she said no longer made sense to him. The love she had killed with her betrayal was in the past. He was broken, but he wasn't angry, the anger was long gone, only cold determination remained. "Do you love me?" Lukasz said slowly, as if he didn't believe her words. "And when you were with him, did you love him too?" Martina cried, covering her face with her hands. Her sobs shook her body, but Lukasz felt no compassion. He had been waiting for this moment, and now his heart was like a stone. "I'll never. I understood everything, the children, the house, you are the most important thing for me. David means nothing, I was wrong. I beg you, forgive me." Lukasz sighed, he didn't want to continue this conversation. Everything was very clear. "Martin, I can't forgive it," his voice was quiet, but firm. "Everything between us is ruined. You chose David, and now that he's fallen, you want to go back. But it's too late for me. Our marriage is nothing. No, Lucas, please. I'll make it up to you, we can. She rushed to him, grabbing his hands, but Lucas gently released them. I said it's over. I'm filing for divorce. You can stay in the house for the sake of the children, but I'm leaving. I don't see the point of our marriage anymore. He got up from the table without looking at her. Martina sat with her arms wrapped around herself as if frozen. Her crying filled the kitchen, but it didn't matter to Lucas. He walked to the hallway, slowly put on his jacket and went outside, facing the cold night air. He had nothing more to say. The next morning, Lukasz got up early to avoid seeing Martina. He packed his things as if nothing had happened, kissed the children quietly so as not to wake them, and left a note in the kitchen, I will file for divorce. The house stays with you and the kids. We'll deal with the papers later. He didn't want to cause drama, didn't want to discuss housing, property, or money. The main thing for him was that the children should stay living in familiar conditions, and Lukasz himself was ready to leave without claiming anything else. A few days passed, and Lucas had already found a new apartment. It was much smaller than their shared house, just a one-room on the outskirts of the city. Simple, unremarkable, but it was what he needed right now. A place where he could be alone and start from scratch. That night he sat on the couch in his new apartment and stared at the ceiling, thinking about how quickly things had changed. He didn't want to share anything anymore, not the furniture, not the appliances, not the car. It all seemed unimportant compared to what he had lost inside. Despite his determination, however, Lucas realized that the children should not suffer because of his and Martina's divorce. He kept in touch with them, calling every evening, inquiring about school, helping with homework over the phone. He often came to pick them up to spend time together, to go to a cafe, for a walk, just to talk. Lukasz realized that the divorce would be a shock for the children, but he would do everything he could to make sure they didn't feel abandoned. Martina, for her part, kept her distance. When Lukasz came to pick up the children, she simply nodded, avoiding eye contact. There were no more conversations between them, no more clarifications of their relationship. Everything happened mundanely, as if it was just a stage of their life to go through. Lucas had already accepted the fact that their life together with Martina was over. He felt detached, but it didn't hurt him anymore. It was a void he didn't yet know how to fill. One evening, as Lukasz was bringing the children home, Martina tried to start a conversation. Lucas, can't we talk? I don't want it to end like this. He stopped for a moment at the threshold, looked at her, but could not find the words. Why? It's all over long ago, he thought. I will see the children, but you and I have nothing else, he answered briefly and turned away, leaving her standing on the threshold. Several months had passed since Lucas had filed for divorce. He had already gotten used to his new life, although the children sometimes missed the old house and the family life they had once led. But Lukasz tried not to think about the past. He knew that the way back was closed, and the only thing left for him was to move forward. Quite by chance, one ordinary Saturday evening, Lukasz met Anna at the store. They had not seen each other for many years, although they had once worked together. Anna was a widow, her husband had died in an accident a few years ago, and she was raising her daughter alone. She had always been a calm, balanced woman, and Lucas had always been easy with her. They talked for about 5 minutes, and Lucas suddenly felt calm around her. Lucas, how are you? Anna asked him cautiously, looking at him with a slight smile. It's been a long time. Lucas smiled slightly and shrugged his shoulders. Oh, here we go, divorcing Martina. Kids. I'm trying to manage somehow. Anna looked at him with understanding. It must be hard. I, too, had a difficult period after Igor was gone. But with time you learn to move on. They exchanged numbers and agreed to meet for coffee sometime. A few days later they met again in a small cafe in the city center. It was easy with Anna, they talked simply, without tension. Anna told how she was coping with raising her daughter, how she was trying to get back to normal life after her husband's death. Lukasz was able to open up for the first time in a long time and told her about his divorce from Martina. Anna listened attentively, without judging or giving unnecessary advice. It was a relief for Lukasz. "You know, Anna," he said at the end of the meeting, "it's been a long time since I've talked about this with someone other than lawyers." "Thank you." Anna smiled. "We all go through hardships, but it's important to move forward, no matter how hard things get." With these meetings, their new chapter began. Lukasz spent more and more time with Anna. She did not pressure him, did not rush things. Their relationship developed gradually, based on mutual respect and support. Anna understood him, and Lukasz felt it. There was no falseness in her that Martina had in the last years of their marriage. Anna became something new for Lukasz, something calm, like a quiet harbor after a long storm. The relationship with Anna developed gradually, without haste. Lukasz did not strive for something dizzying or passionate. He was no longer looking for vivid emotions, he needed stability, and with Anna he finally found it. She did not demand anything extra from him, did not reproach him, did not build illusions. It was just two people who had experienced their losses and found support in each other. Over time, their bond grew stronger and stronger, and Lukasz introduced Anna to his children. This was an important step for him, because he wanted to make sure that Anna would be able to find a common language with them. Fortunately, Anna did just fine. She didn't try to become a second mom for them, but she was always ready to listen, help with lessons or just make a joke to lighten the mood. Her own daughter, who also experienced the loss of her father, quickly found a common language with Lukasz's children. They all started to spend time together, walking in parks, going to the countryside, having picnics. Lukasz liked to see how the children gradually grew attached to Anna and how she became an important person to them. One evening they all had dinner together at Lukasz's house. Anna cooked dinner, the children played catch-up around the apartment, and Lukasz sat at the table and watched the scene with a smile. His life finally had the peace and harmony he had been missing. His daughter looked into his eyes hopefully and asked, "Daddy, can we go to the river this weekend?" Lukasz smiled and nodded. "Sure. We'll take Anna and Nastia and have a picnic." The daughter shouted happily and ran to her brother to share the news. Lukasz and Anna exchanged warm smiles. For him, these moments were true happiness, no drama, no lies, just a calm, quiet life that he missed so much. Meanwhile, Martina watched from the sidelines. She saw Lukasz coming to pick up the children with Anna and her daughter, and they all went away together for the weekend. For Martina, it was like a knife to the heart. Seeing her ex-husband happy with another woman, realizing that everything she had destroyed had now been rebuilt without her involvement, was unbearable for her. One day, when Lukasz brought the children home after a weekend away, Martina stood at the window and watched them laughing as they got out of the car. She saw Lukasz helping his daughter pack her backpack, her son talking cheerfully to him. This picture was tearing her heart out. She tried not to show her emotions, but there was a complete emptiness inside her. Lukasz was no longer a part of her. He had built a new life, and Martina realized that she no longer played a role in it. She was forced to watch him build a relationship based on the trust and peace of mind that they once had but was now gone forever. Every time Lukasz came to pick up the children, Martina tried to find an excuse to talk to him, but he was no longer interested in those conversations. He only spoke to her on business, briefly, calmly, but coldly. Time passed, and Martine realized that her attempts to win him back were in vain. Everything had changed. Lukasz was living a new life, and she was left with empty memories of what had once been. Now she could only regret how she had ruined her life and her family. The mistakes she had made were too big to undo. Martina was left alone in a large, empty house that had once been full of life and laughter. The children stayed with Lukasz and Anna more and more often, becoming more and more attached to their new family. Martina tried to re-establish a relationship with them, but felt that they were drifting apart. Their attitude towards her had changed. Although they did not accuse her directly, there was an elusive chill in their behavior. Lukasz, realizing that the children might turn away from their mother, did not let them close themselves off from her completely. He preserved their relationship with Martina for their own good. However, Martina herself felt increasingly alien in their lives. Her choices had caused her to lose everything. Every night she sat in the kitchen of an empty house, realizing that she had destroyed her family. In moments of loneliness, she wished she could turn back the clock, but she knew it was impossible. Lukasz, meanwhile, continued to build his new life. As the years passed, he no longer thought about what had once been with Martina. Everything related to her was in the past. Lukasz was focused on the future, on Anna, the children, and the relationship they were building together. Lukasz no longer looked back. He realized that the choices he had made were the right ones. His new life was centered on his children, Anna, and simple, everyday joys that had not seemed so important to him before. Together with Anna, they created an atmosphere of calm and trust in which Lukasz felt protected from past mistakes. Their relationship did not require explanations, everything was natural, without lies and betrayals. Anna became for him not just a partner, but a real support. She took care of Lukasz and his children with a sincerity that left no room for doubt. Time spent together became precious to him, family dinners, walks in the park, joint trips out of town, all this filled his life with meaning, which he had long lost. The children, too, had grown accustomed to Anna. At first they were wary, especially after the divorce of her parents. But over time Anna found an approach to each of them, not trying to replace their mother, but simply becoming a friend to them. Her kindness and patience helped the children to get used to the new way of life, and Lukasz was grateful to her for that. One evening, when the children had already gone to bed, Lukasz and Anna sat on the veranda, drinking tea and enjoying the silence of the summer evening. The air was fresh and there was a calm, peaceful atmosphere around them. Anna looked at Lukasz and quietly asked, "Are you happy?" Lukasz thought for a moment, looking into the distance, and then answered with a smile. "Yes. I finally feel okay again. That's what I needed. Thank you for this, Anna." She gently squeezed his hand in return, the same peace that Lukasz had missed so much in recent years shining in her eyes. They didn't talk about the past anymore. Everything that was connected to Martina was in the past. Lukasz realized that after going through all the difficulties, he had found himself again. Now his future was tied to Anna and the children, and they were building new family traditions together. Meanwhile, Martina was alone. After David's departure and her divorce from Lukasz, she had completely lost ground under her feet. The house that had once been full of life now seemed like a huge, empty shell. The children stayed with Lukasz and Anna more and more often, becoming more and more attached to their new family. Martina tried to re-establish a relationship with them, but felt that her efforts were going nowhere. Their estrangement was the result of her own mistakes. Her attempts to establish her personal life were also unsuccessful. Her friend Sveta often tried to introduce her to new men, but Martina realized that she was not ready for a new relationship. She felt too devastated to make a fresh start. Her thoughts were preoccupied with the past, with what she had lost. Every morning she woke up with the heavy realization that her old life was behind her. Every time she saw Lukasz come to pick up the children with Anna, Martina felt the sharp pain of loss. She could no longer get back what had been, and this realization became unbearable for her. The house that had once seemed like a fortress to her was now a reminder of what she had destroyed with her own hands. Years passed. Lukasz no longer remembered anything that had to do with Martina. His life was now centered on his children, on Anna and the future they were building together. They created new family traditions that brought them joy and confidence in the future. Together they cooked dinners, planned trips, and spent time the way Lukasz had always dreamed of, without stress, without lies and hidden resentments. Anna became part of his life, and her daughter Nastia became part of the family. Lukasz did not seek for vivid emotions or violent passions, he needed calmness, stability, and reliability. And with Anna he found it. She became for him the quiet place where he could feel secure. he was no longer looking for something grandiose. Now his happiness consisted in simple things: family dinners, walks in nature, taking care of the children. One evening, when they were again sitting on the veranda, enjoying the silence, Anna looked at Lukasz and said with a smile, "You know, I'm so glad we met again. I didn't think I could find such peace of mind after everything that happened." Lukasz nodded and, taking her hand, replied quietly, "I did too. You're like a salvation for me after the storm. I finally found what I've been looking for all my life." They sat in silence, enjoying the moment, and realized that now their lives were filled with new meaning. Anna became for Lukasz not just a partner, but a source of peace, which he lacked so much. Meanwhile, Martina was becoming more and more estranged from her family. She felt that the children were becoming more attached to Lukasz and Anna. Her attempts to establish contact with them came to nothing. She was left alone in her empty house, living with memories of what had been and what would never return. Lukasz's story ended on a positive note. Despite the betrayal, he managed to start life anew with Anna, building a strong and harmonious family. And Martina was left alone, regretting what she had destroyed, but could not change anything. Thank you for listening to this story. I apologize for any mistakes you may have made. Write in the comments what you think and share your wishes.